Ashley Falsafi, thanks for coming on. Look, I've been excited to chat with you because you do have a really diverse background, and frankly, you're in an industry I know nothing about. Like often people come on here and I know at least something about what they do, but commodities trading and the educational platform you have over there is a space I don't know anything about. Maybe you could start by just telling us like what led you into that extremely nuanced and technical world. How'd you get there?
Yeah, so I was working in operations and kind of quote unquote general business for a while, and I wanted to get into sales. Honestly, Eric, every company I'd been at, the salespeople made a lot of money. I mean, way more than all of us who were, struggling in school and graduate school and all that. And all of a sudden, the sales guy is making all this money. So I thought I wanted to get into sales, and so I jumped into sales, specifically high ticket sales. And so, this world of consultants, experts, nuanced ways to make money. That's kind of a big industry now. They're really everywhere you go on social media. There's an ad for somebody to teach you how to do X, Y, or Z, right? And so started in a real estate one, did really well there, learned a lot about the business for a couple of years, was a director there. And this opportunity came up to run operations for this group. And I decided, yeah, one thing consistent in my history is kind of every job I moved to was a jump forward. And not everybody's lucky enough to have that. And I've been fairly successful doing that. And so when this opportunity to be a COO opened up for Build a Farm, I thought, yeah, let's do it because operationally they run very similar. But to your point, it's a really unique niche. And what we do is bring everyday people on board and teach them how to get involved in brokering oil and gas deals. And really, it's we have senior brokers who do the meat and potatoes, but everybody's able to get in and do the work. And if you put in the hard work, you get really good results. And so there was twofold interest for me. It was first, let me see if I can run this thing right. Let's see if I can do that. It's the next evolution in my career. And the second thing was, wow, this is a really unique offer. And so here we are. They've been going for a couple of years now. We're growing every day. So it's awesome.
Well, there's a couple things I want to pick up on there, but there's two in particular I have to figure out a little bit more about. One, you said you wanted to go into sales, and there's a small percentage of salespeople that intentionally choose sales, but
Yeah.
most people accidentally end up in sales rather than having an epiphany of like, ooh, I think that's for me. So I want to get to that, but also sales doesn't often lead, like success in sales doesn't often lead to operations. There tends to be a different mindset, a different gap there. So those are two areas I'd love to steer. What made sales attractive to you? Sure, money, but money's the successful outcome of being good at sales. What made you want to
Right.
go do the job of a salesperson?
I think, yeah, money, the motivation only lasts for so long, right? Because if you hate your job or you're terrible at it, money is only going to keep you motivated for so long. I think the challenge was for me, I knew financially it was a big draw because I knew salespeople would make more money. Going back to my college years, Eric, way back when now, I sold cars with my dad, who was really good in the car business. And I learned a lot in that process as a young person in college. And one of the things that struck out to me was he never was that typical sales guy. He focused on service and just being nice to people, which was such a weird, still is a weird concept for a car salesman, right? And my dad was fairly successful at it. So when I finished college, I thought, oh, well, I don't need to stay. I'm not going to sell cars anymore. I'm going to go get a regular job, right? College now. And so 15 years later, I thought, I want to try that sales thing again. And so that's really kind of what drew me back to it. And I think your second question is really interesting because I had such a large ops background in between. That's why it made a lot of sense for me to go. When I first went into high ticket sales, I was a sales director. So I wasn't a closer. I'm not even really that good at as a closer, but I do understand how to run teams. And I learned leadership at it early enough on that I can lead any team. It doesn't really matter what it is. And I had been operations, I did supply chain, marketing, did manufacturing operations where I was kind of spread everywhere and got a little management taste of everything. So I had the confidence that I could do it. Of course, that's only half of it, right? Now you have to go execute it.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you had a positive example of what a good salesperson could look like. And to your point, most people may not think car salesman is what a good one looks like, but you had a good role model
I
of
did.
how good selling can be done, which I think it's often missing for people. I don't know. Like, I think most people grow up thinking I would rather not be in sales. I think most people have an immediate negative reaction to a salesperson. You didn't have that because you had seen what good selling could look like. So I could see how that would have maybe reduced the barrier a little bit for you.
Yeah, for sure.
If you can go back in time, like what was that transition like? What was it like in the moment to go from I'm not doing sales, I'd like to. And I know you said you moved into more of a sales leadership role, running a sales team more than
Right.
closing yourself. But what were some of the hurdles? What were some of the things that were easier than you thought? Like, go back to that moment and like, what was it like to make that transition into sales leadership?
So I hadn't been in high ticket sales before. I kind of knew what it was. 5, 6 years ago, it wasn't like it is now. I mean, it's really exploded. Um, but there are still fundamental leadership skills and business fundamentals that apply no matter what we're doing, right? And so, how was it going to apply both that kind of book knowledge and also my experience to this new role? And I think a lot of that gave me confidence was I had the opportunity to be hired by somebody who was really good at sales leadership. So I had a good mentor right off the bat when I went over there. And we really clicked. What he didn't know book smart wise, I was able to fill in the blanks. And what I didn't know from a sales director role, he was able to fill those blanks in. So very quickly, I was able to get up to speed. And what I mean by up to speed is really just realize that we can do this. I have a team of managers. I have a team of closers. We have to lead this team of people. It's the same thing as I've done before, whether it was operations, whether it was warehouses, whether it was a marketing team. It was the same thing. We have a goal. How are we going to get there? And so I just leaned on a lot of the basic, at least what I thought was basic leadership kind of skills that I'd learned over time and also continue to learn. I do to this day. And in that operation, I started picking up all the sales gurus. Let me get this book. Let me get this book. Never stop learning. It helped.
I think you're being very humble about something that maybe we're taking too for granted in this conversation. And maybe you're aware of that and you're just naturally humble. I'm a humble person, or maybe you're unaware of how hard it typically is for somebody who's not a salesperson go lead salespeople. There's like, I led salespeople, right? And I was a salesperson, and we are the best at convincing you of exactly what you want to be convinced of, as if you're my boss.
Right, right.
So good at blowing smoke and making excuses in ways that sound legitimate. And like, we're just brilliant at that. And usually it's really difficult unless you're hip to the game to be able to stand in that fire and call BS where appropriate and apply pressure where appropriate or support where appropriate. Is there more to that story? Like, which side is it? Are you being gentle and polite about how hard it was, or were you just maybe more naturally good at that than other people?
I think it's 20 years of practicing being humble, is because it
Okay.
wasn't always that way. Because you have to be really aggressive in sales, right? But I think also, to your point, I reported into the CEO at that time, and one of the things that he made clear to me before I could move up anywhere else was you need to learn sales and all the shenanigans that they're going to pull. I think that was his exact quote.
Good words.
And I didn't understand what he meant at the beginning because, of course, I led people who would try and pull things. Sales is different, right? So I did have to spend some time to learn that. Um, but again, Eric, to be honest, it's still setting expectations, making them very clear. And if we're not hitting those, what's the reason why? Am I not providing what you need to be successful, or are you not putting forth the effort to be successful? I can control one, I can't control the other. And one thing sales reps, in my experience, really appreciate is that really upfront, honest conversation. So maybe it's a little bit of both. Maybe it's a little humble, but it's also, we're still at the bare bones of it, looking at how do we accomplish our goals? And with salespeople, it's their paycheck, right? It's directly related to their paycheck. And so I think that's probably the best way to answer it.
I love that answer because what I hear over here, having I led a sales team for a decade and launched a leadership course after running a sales team for a decade. So I've coached, I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of people through these types of dynamics. But what I'm hearing you describe is that leadership is pretty portable across domains. Now, you described it as it's just expectation setting. And I would add, well, it's expectation setting and then holding them accountable. And like, I think you were implying that, but like that is the same, whether you are a project manager, an accountant, a lawyer, a salesperson, those conversations all share the same concepts. It doesn't really matter what vertical or product or industry you're applying them to. Have you found that it's fairly portable skill set once you had it?
I do think so. I believe that firmly. So I think that especially when you're looking at a hiring, like you're in an interview process, if they've been a leader and they've been successful, and you can determine that however you want to determine that in that interview, if they've been successful at leading people or groups or departments or organizations, it's going to translate. I can teach you how to do the spreadsheets. I can teach you our SOPs and whatever the business is. I can teach you that. I can't teach you as easily how to be a great leader. We could do it, but Eric, it takes time. So I do think it's portable. I think that I'm not special in that regard. I think that because I've led so many different departments, whether it's a supervisor, manager, director, senior director, COO, it is portable. I feel like I can do that with just about any discipline. Now, there's probably some exceptions. You wouldn't want me as your CFO. It's just not my discipline that I'm an expert in. But if you wanted me to run your office of accountants, I could do that. So I do think there is some limits, right? I think that it would be a disservice to say you could just do that, because people work really hard to become CFOs, and people work really hard to become really talented closers, which is why I'm real careful to say I was in sales, but I'm not a closer. Good closers, that's a real tough discipline. Those guys are really talented, whether it's in car sales or SaaS or whatever you're selling. So I'm real careful not to take light of that. And if you've been in sales, when you've been in those marketing meetings or the VP of marketing meetings, and well, just tell your closers to work better, or they're not doing their job. Like, well, they are. Let me explain what they're doing, and give you a little insight to what their day looks like. And so, I think that happens a lot in sales. Is people take it for granted a little bit. Especially in my experience, I've seen leaders who it's almost like a necessary evil. Well, we need salespeople, but we're just going to go do this, and they'll be fine. Salespeople are very temperamental too. I learned that quickly.
Well, I mean, yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's actually one of the greatest strengths. I always thought of it as like, I want to employ passionate champions. I want to work with people that frankly give a shit, that have something on the line, have skin in the game, right? And quite often, to your point earlier, we tend to be kind of coin operated as salespeople. And whether it's truly we care about money or we like the things money gets us in our lives, that tends to be a primary driver. And I can be pretty passionate about my ability to earn my bonus so that I can do the things I love in my life. And I want that, right? As a sales leader, I want people who are passionate like that. And I had a guy named Mike who worked for me that if I didn't swear at him, he didn't take me seriously enough because he was passionate and he wanted me to be passionate too. And if I wasn't, he wouldn't say it, but it was basically F you, boss. Like, you don't care enough. Right? And so that can be a hard line to ride. I think you had another advantage. I can kind of talk out of both sides of my mouth about this. On the one hand, having never been in sales, you might not be hip to some of the games, though you had a wise CEO pointed out to you. But on the other hand, I have found sometimes it's easier to lead people when you actually don't know the answers of what they're supposed to do. Like, the direction they're going, there is a playbook, but you're not the expert in the playbook, which makes it impossible for you to pretend that you are. And therefore, you're kind of forced to be more humble, to ask better questions, because you couldn't tell them how the hell to solve the problem. You just don't know. What was that like for you?
Yeah. So the first thing that comes to mind with that is when I first got into high ticket sales and, just kind of thrown into it, one of the things that kind of my mentor in that told me to do is we need to get you a win. So these managers know that you can do the job, right? And so obviously I couldn't do much for a sales win. I barely knew what we were selling at the time, right? We're talking a couple of weeks in, a month in. And so I just dove into all the operational problems that were there because I could see them. They were obvious to me. Not obvious to this guy because he was a sales manager or director. He wasn't the book smart operations guy like I was. So I said, well, over here, this is broke. Like operationally, this is terrible. The customer experience is not right. So I just went in and dove in and started getting some small victories. Now all of a sudden, the sales managers were like, okay, this guy he can help us. We might not be able to coach us. They didn't know that yet, but at least he can help us. And the things I was doing were small, but they were high impact for them. It affected their day-to-day life. It made things better for them. And in turn, with that respect, then I could work on earning their respect just as a leader in general. And you're right. They knew this. People wouldn't come to me with a recording and say, how would you have closed this guy? I could give them my opinion, but it's not going to be groundbreaking, right? But more importantly, I was teaching these guys how to be managers because as the company grew, it became much more formal. You know, when I started, there was maybe 30 people. When I left, there was over 200. And so structure came into play. These guys didn't know what structure meant. These guys were lifelong sales guys. So even as the sales managers. So what I was able to do is create those foundational pieces from an operational perspective in a sales operation and let them understand that this is how it's going to work in a way that it's sustainable. So as we continue to grow, we're not going to crumble at the foundation. And so I think that was really important looking back in getting their buy-in. You know, any project, you know, you always want buy-in from the people who you're going to affect. That's kind of project management 101. Well, it was the same thing with this. They needed to buy in that I could do this with zero sales experience, as far as they know. And so, really, those small victories were important. You know, I think we'll probably talk about it later on, but empathy is really important, and not just saying it, really believing in it. So once they knew I cared about them and their well-being, the buy-in was easy for me to pass down new things, new processes, and things like that, new software. It was really easy after that.
I think that makes a ton of sense. Like put a couple wins on the board, develop momentum, show these guys you can actually help them. That's a key word I captured because that's the biggest question we have when we get a new manager, right? Like, what's this freaking guy going to do? Is he going to make my life harder or easier? Like it's binary. There's very little middle ground in our perception of a new leader. And if you could generate a little momentum, that makes a ton of sense. Can you think back? Like what were some small wins? What are some examples of small wins a leader can put on the board for something?
So think about their day-to-day life. So I have a keen ability to find out what's wrong with something. So when I was first there, I just started diving into all their processes. And in sales, as you know, you have a CRM, you have pipelines, you have all this. How are they all working together? Well, they weren't connected properly. They weren't working together. At the same time, I was learning how they were currently put together. And like, well, maybe this doesn't make sense. Maybe we should try something different. And so ultimately, getting the right leads to the right sales reps at the right time was something that I embraced early on and continued to make strides for years because that really just never ends. Erik, in sales, it's never perfect, right? I just want all the great leads, so they're never perfect, but just fine tuning some of those operational hiccups, I think made a big difference early on. And also, I think the previous person who I ended up taking over for, there was maybe some challenges with communicating to the C-suite on our issues or just being that spokesperson for the sales group. And I was able to do that because I had already worked in that environment in the past. And it wasn't really unusual for me to go into a C-suite and explain to them, here's the issue we have, here's why it's impactful. Here's what the result will be if we kind of change it. And by the way, I have an idea on how to change it if you give me the thumbs up. So I think that was the second piece that really got bought in for them, or buy-in for them, is they knew I was going to go and fight for them. Accountability is a big part of that. In sales, it was easy for me to use that as leverage because I could say, look, guys, I can't go fight for us if we're not doing our job. And our job is XYZ. And you're not doing it. The teams aren't doing it. As soon as this happens, I will go fight for you, but I can't until we get to this place And by the way, what do you need for me to help you get to that place so we can go do this fight and go have this conversation, right? Um, it's a really great experience.
Those are phenomenal examples. I mean, you gave one example that directly impacted them, right? Their efficient use of the systems and tools that are at their disposal so that you could accurately deploy the leads to the people that probably needed or had the best ability to monetize those and to do so in a balanced way rather than giving your senior guy all the good ones and making the young bucks earn their way.
Yeah.
And that's the type of change that can be difficult to lead through organizational change. Like to get a sales guy in general to volunteer to use their CRM or systems or click more buttons than they need to can be challenging, but like, it sounds like you had to convince them that it would be good for them. So that's like one example of thing that's good for them. On the other hand was like representing them well at the C-suite and showing them that you'll fight for them, which I think is often one of the questions we also have about a new leader. Like, all right, you can do helpful stuff, but like, you're gonna put lipstick on a pig every time some new corporate announcement comes down and make me swallow it, or what? So that last point you made, I think, is my favorite. Like helping people recognize that I can't fight for you if you don't give me the right ammunition. Like
Exactly.
if I go into the C-suite empty-handed, like what do you want me to do? Like how possibly could I get that? It made me think back. We rolled out some new products in my latter years at when I was at Victaulic, and we sold mechanical piping systems. And so we had, I don't know, hundreds of products we sold into these buildings to these contractors, right? And there was one in particular the company was really trying to fight for. And my team liked that idea and had a bunch of things we needed to do that well. Demo materials, right? Just stuff, sales collateral that really would have helped our case. But they wouldn't document where the opportunities were. Like we literally had no traceability on how big the market could be for the opportunity in our geography, let alone the country, right? And so I remember some tense conversations where they were like, to sell it, we need these things. I'm like, I hear you. Guys, if I walk in there and ask for those things, they're going to say, well, how big are the opportunities? Help us quantify the investment of time and resources to generating those. And if I can show them it by project and contract or an opportunity, we'll get it. It's a $1 billion company. It's a big organization. They'll absolutely do it. But guys, if you send me in there empty-handed, like I can't do any of those things. So that was like almost pseudo PTSD of those battles. Try and get their participation. How did you have to grow through all of that, right? We're talking about it at very summarized points. I can tell you've thought about this before. You're good at communicating the storyline, and that's because you lived it and know it. But like, share the harder side of it. Like, where did you struggle in those times? What were the things that were slower to learn along the way?
Yeah. So I'll answer that by giving you a little bit of my leadership journey. So when I first became a leader, I was promoted to supervisor, and I just came in on a Tuesday, and now I'm supervising the people I just worked with for 3 years. We could probably do a whole episode on those challenges. And soon after, I became a manager in a sister department. And I was pretty young in my career, very confident, as all of us are in our 20s. And I had a director who I reported into who was probably in my position now, kind of on, he's kind of been there, done that. Now he's just taken this job, whatever his reason was, later in his career. And he described me as a Mustang horse that you just have to hold on to. Just let it go, but you got to hold on to him, right? And I never understood that till, later in my career. And what really I started to learn, and to answer your question about what was difficult, was as I mentioned, I have a good ability to look at a big picture and see what's wrong, what I think is wrong. And I think the key word is think, what I think is wrong. And so early in my career, I would have no issue going to some other director in a department, not even in my group, and telling them what I thought was wrong with what they were doing. Probably wasn't the best approach. The best example, well, there's a couple examples, unfortunately, but there's an approach to take to have those conversations, right? And so the lessons learned were, I had to, my director who I reported into said, you're gonna have to go back over there. You're gonna have to apologize because that was not how we should approach this. You're not wrong, about what do you see here, but that approach isn't going to get us where we want to go. And that was really not good. So that kind of started my journey of maybe we need to be a little more humble. And that's why I kind of laughed when you said that, Erik, because I probably learned that the hard way. Um, Out of those situations, um, when I was managing a customer service group, um, a big company, I asked my director, I said, can I go to the corner office and have a conversation with the COO and just pick his brain? Like, I'm on the front lines here with customer service. He doesn't hear what we hear. And of course he knew what I was getting into. And he also wanted me to learn this lesson, which was the higher up we go, the more people our decisions affect. And there's a responsibility with how you deliver messages. And I had no idea. Way too arrogant, way too young. I didn't understand that. So when I go to that corner office for the first time, um, I left it thinking I did a great thing. I let him know what's going on out here. Like, that's great. My approach was horrible. Um, that was the second time that I had to go jump on the sword and apologize. But out of that, I got a mentor who, for the next 8, 9 years, would once every month or two would take me out for lunch and just shoot the business. Like, what's going on? What are you hearing? And I would be able to ask him, hey, I saw you reported this in the quarterly meeting. What does that really mean? And so it turned out to be a really great experience. And part of the point of that is it takes those kind of guys for us to be successful, I think, in a lot of ways. And so early in my career, I had a lot of good mentors. And that's why I think I take a lot of pride in doing that for people who are young in their careers. I'm really sensitive about that when I see people who are young in their careers being mistreated by upper management or maybe losing that fire, because I think that helps drive you, right? And when you see that spirit snuffed out by poor leadership, that's really unfortunate. And I think it's probably a lot more common than I know. So I take really a lot of pride in that. But yeah, my first few experiences were humbling for sure.
Well, it sounds like you were also a passionate champion of the things and causes that you thought were right, and learned some good lessons about selling up and coaching up and leading vertically, not just horizontally or down. So you've commented a couple times on the quality of mentors you've been able to have in your life. And usually that doesn't happen by accident. Don't get me wrong. Some people get super lucky, but that's probably not the case. What guidance would you give to a young leader, young professional on how to think about and maybe nurture, cultivate the mentorships that ultimately will help shape their careers?
I think there's a couple of things. One, they have to recognize that they should do it. Not everybody is comfortable just asking someone for help, um, especially when you're younger and you have a decent job and you're really you're really pretty confident, right? So why should you go ask somebody for help? I just had the desire to continue to learn, and I think that motivated me. And also the real sheer shock of waking up one day and there was just no training. I'm just in charge of people now. So I took it upon myself. I think some of the advice that I would share with younger people in their careers is find someone. And Erik, now it's easier than 25 years ago. I choose your platform and you can find somebody. It might, they have to be aware of the quality. I think there's a lot of that out there, and the quality might be not as good as they're looking for. But over time and experience, you start to learn what fits you, what you define as good advice and good mentorship, and what's not. But I think the very first thing is they have to realize that they should do it. Especially companies that are smaller, they don't have mentor programs. They're not going to have probably much coaching, training, or maybe HR gives you a two-pager on what not to say. I mean, that's probably the extent of training. So you're going to have to figure it out on your own. And mentoring and finding people who are experts in their fields, who have experience in their fields, just keep reaching out. I think that's really the best advice.
Yeah, that's a great point. it's pretty tough to solve a problem you're unaware that you have. And so
Right.
the willingness to look in the mirror or acknowledge, I don't know what I'm doing, which
Right.
I can't believe how hard, like it is hard. The things you're saying are causing me to reflect, right? For some reason, when we're given a title, we have some
Yes.
belief that the new pay structure and job description have granted us some downloaded version, almost matrix style. I know
Right.
come through,
Right.
but it's just like I got promoted Friday and now it's Monday. And I don't know anything different than I did before, but I am going to go lead these individuals. Like that's such a weird thing that I think almost every leader can relate to. And it takes some humbling, usually through
It does.
experience, failure, to recognize, ooh, wait, I actually don't know a damn thing about this
Yeah.
whole leadership thing. And the sooner you get to that, the better, but you do have to get there at some point if you're going to accept a mentor. That makes sense. How about thinking about the selection of a mentor, the identification of a mentor is one thing, but the ability to try and identify who is a good mentor. Like
Yeah.
that's not easy. To your point, there's a lot of companies, I've lived in them, worked in them, and led people through them and coached people through them where, there is executive sabotage, where you do have a C-suite or director level or something that really doesn't buy into giving back and helping and mentoring and those things, right? And we've kind of abandoned the philosophy of a tradesman and journeyman.
Yes.
Like prior to the 1900s, prior to maybe it was Henry Ford, maybe it was the factory that really started to change that. I don't know where it would have changed in business history, but prior to that, if you wanted to be a blacksmith or a carpenter or anything you would go and do, the only path to doing it was hang out with somebody who did it better than you for a long time, right? And you observe and learn and make a bunch of errors under their guidance. So that journeyman type mentality, that have a leader who you submit to that helps you get better at things is how it used to be. It didn't really translate well over to business. And it's pretty tough to do logistically. So I get that. But like, how should people think about who they forge these relationships, not just identifying that they need them?
I think if I was young in my career again, I would stick with my discipline, right? So if you're a supply chain analyst or an assistant, find people who are supply chain managers and directors and operations people. If you reach out enough, somebody will respond because the good ones will be, I don't know if flatter's the right word, but they'll be excited to help somebody. Then the next step is you can't waste their time. And I usually, especially back when I was really just blindly reaching out to people, I would have an agenda. So if somebody agreed to it, I'd say, here's what I want to do for the next week or next month or once a month, whatever. I ran into this problem. Talk to me how to handle this. And maybe one other bullet point, right? So they weren't wasting their own time and I wasn't wasting their time. It was very concise, very specific. I remember I had a lawyer. I wasn't in law. I found this head lawyer of a law firm, and he said, "Yeah, I can give you an hour a month." I said, "Okay, great." And so for the next month before that first conversation with him, I had to figure out what am I going to talk to a lawyer it was a fairly large law firm, and I thought, well, he has to have people that do things. I have 40 people in this room that I'm having problems with. What problems specifically? Oh, well, they're not meeting their KPIs, or I don't feel like they're motivated enough. I said, great. So I just put that into 2 bullet points. I said, I have 40 people that report to me. I'm having trouble hitting these KPIs. I'm having trouble motivating them. Help me understand that. And he went on for an hour to tell me how he does it with his lawyers and his assistant staff. And, he had like 30 something people in his office. And I think my point with that story is it doesn't matter what the discipline is, right? We go back to leadership, you go back to those issues. There is going to be similarities and overlap at some point in that journey for everybody. But starting in your own discipline is probably the easiest place.
I think that's twofold good advice. It'd be easier in your own discipline to be able to identify someone who's maybe lived through those things and could help you see around the corners because they've done it. And yeah, really, it sounds like you did a good job of taking ownership of You were rolling it. You didn't show up and say, "What can you teach me?" You showed up
That's
and said,
right.
"Here's what I'm struggling with. What do you got, man?" And there's a degree of awareness and ownership there that it feels like would be valuable for a young leader to acknowledge as soon as they could.
Yeah, it takes a little bit of initiative. You have to be, I would assume, if you're going to even consider looking out for a mentor or someone who can help coach you, you have some self-awareness that you need some help. And I think if you get to that point, the action and the effort comes pretty easily. Because if you're already motivated to like, man, I'm not good at this. I got to find some way to help. Well, there's no classes on this stuff, Erik. I was in grad school maybe 10 years ago. They're still not teaching leadership, just so you know. So you're not going to find a class on it. So you're going to have to either find somebody who can help you, read a book. Books are great. But somebody in your own discipline who's been there and done that is going to give you some insight that might be a little more specific to you. And then as you grow in your career, you might outgrow that person. You got to look for somebody else. And there's been times I had 4 or 5 at once. I mean, I don't know if I needed that much help, Erik, or I just decided to learn that much. Either way is what I did it.
Yeah. Well, I bet that helped you accelerate your journey into more significant roles. That sounded like it probably primed the catapult so that you could climb the corporate ladder, if you will, when you had the opportunities to do so. If you could go back in time, you could wave your magic wand and go back and whisper a word of wisdom into your young leadership self's ear about maybe a skill that would be worth leaning into. Not a stock to invest in. That'd be too easy. That's not what we're talking about. But like,
Yeah.
what are some of the what are some of the things you wish someone had grabbed you by the ear and from a position of confidence said, "Hey, this is what's really going to shape the rest of your career. Go get good at it."
It took me a while to learn that to gain influence, in my experience, it was a lot easier if you showed real empathy. If you actually showed through actions and words that you care about the people who are reporting to you, then that influence becomes a lot easier. Nobody really made that clear to me until later in my career. And had I known that from the beginning, and probably a lot of humility, I would have gone faster.
Yeah, I think I had some perception that humanity that you're really talking, that's how I think about that, right? Like
Yeah.
it's remembering to be human amidst the shared outcomes we're responsible for and a hierarchy we've been put into. Like that's maybe so easy to articulate, but at the same time, it's really hard to remember. I felt an enormous amount of pressure, like I was expected to know how to do all of these things. And the way I'd gotten good at overcoming situations like that from selling was by doing. Like, I don't know how to sell this thing. Well, I'm going to go out there and fail at it a bunch of times real fast and get
Right.
selling it pretty quick. And so that playbook just did not transfer over. And I definitely forgot to be human during my first X number of years, X being too embarrassingly large of a number to say out loud. What is that? And this isn't true just for leadership, right? I think it's probably true for any responsibility. I don't know if you have kids, but like,
I do.
because you have kids tomorrow doesn't make you good at being a parent. And like,
No.
in fact, it makes you really aware how bad you are, even though yesterday you didn't have. So we have this strange dynamic, maybe as humans, maybe as Americans, maybe as Westerners. I don't know how broad it is, but there's this arrogance of assuming we know how to do something because something external has changed.
Yeah. It- I feel like part of that is the title. So all of a sudden, when you get this title, like you said before, oh, I should just know how to do this now because I'm a manager or I'm a director. Um, in a lot of organizations, the further up you go, the further away from people you get. And that might be part of what we both have felt because our focus is now upwards, not downwards. If you're a director versus a manager, you're looking further into the future of what's happening. Maybe you're developing forecasts when you've never done them before. You understand what a forecast means. You understand what variance on a budget means. You never cared about that as a manager. You just cared about the people were attendance and that they're doing what they're supposed to, maybe some metrics. I think part of the challenge with leaders, especially newer leaders, as they move up in that kind of responsibility ladder, they're further away by design, and it takes real effort to get back over to those frontline people or the salespeople and have a one-on-one with them, not for their performance. That's your manager's job, but for the purpose of just saying, Erik, how are you doing today? How's the family? When you do that consistently, they know you care. One time and never again, they're not going to buy it. And they shouldn't, because that's just not really the effort that it takes. But when you show the effort, the influence comes. And if I would known that sooner on how impactful that is, I probably would have, that would have helped a lot.
Yeah, it's making me think. Last week I was in a conference. It was an HR conference, and they had a speaker come in, a guy, his name's Scott. I can't remember his last name, but he's from a company called Happy Brain Science. And this guy's been doing, he was telling stories of doing it for massive companies, Nike and Intel, et cetera, in the early 2000s. So he's been doing it for quite a while. And the one I was at on Friday was all about AI, like how to help your company, your team, your direct reports not panic about AI, but also acknowledge it's coming fast and there are risks. And how do you help? What does the science say about how to help people respond to those risks as it pertains to AI? It's absolutely fascinating talk. Freaking loved it. In fact, now that I mentioned it, I've got to put it in the show notes. So my ops manager makes sure you do that. But one of the interesting things he mentioned was a study that was done by Google in the early 2000s called Project Aristotle. Have you ever heard of this?
No.
So I just had my ops manager compile a bunch of research on it because I'm fascinated by it. And they sent it over to me today. So I haven't done a deep dive yet, but I read the summary they shot me. And this guy, Scott, mentioned it on Friday. And Google did a deep study into like 180 of their teams to try to figure out why are some so much better than others? Like what really accounts for the difference in performance on these teams? It seems like they went in expecting to find some methodology or maybe some seniority, right? Something that was on the resume or skill sets that people possessed. And what they found is that the number one thing that determined success across all of the teams was psychological safety.
Makes
and the
sense.
next four on the list were 100% dependent on psychological safety. So the top 5 things all really came back to, and the way they described psychological safety was a person's comfortability at getting something wrong or being incorrect without being made fun of, humiliated, or punished. So some of that corporate environment where it's wrong to be wrong,
Yeah.
learn that, right? And I absolutely learned that in some of the companies that I worked at when I was young, that you didn't not know an answer. You went and found or did your dang best to come up with an answer and then pretended that was the answer with confidence until something catastrophic happened or you were proven right. Like that, it was just the way it was done. And that was a terrible lesson for me to learn. I really didn't have a concept of how uncomfortable I was being wrong until I was in a leadership position. And then I was like, wait, what? Say more about that. Cause I was wrong. I'm not a freaking leader anymore. I've got too many guys doing too many things. I can't know everything anymore. So I was kind of forced to adopt that. Maybe you could pick up on that concept, psychological safety, and where that might fit.
Yeah, I think it's important that, my experience, I've been most successful in any role if I knew kind of the field I was playing in and where are the boundaries. And I try to prove that you could push those boundaries a little bit. I'm okay. I'll be good. And so earning that trust with your superiors, the people you report to, goes a long way in giving you a little bit of leeway to make mistakes and be wrong. Probably don't want to make a habit of it. But if I understand these are the out of bounds that I'm playing in, I'm going to get X, Y, and Z done for you. And it's going to be done in this time frame. And we're going to, I'll be happy at the end. As you have those small victories or initial victories, hey, Erik, why don't we, if you give me this latitude, I can do this now. Just expand those boundaries a little bit. So I think one thing I try to do with people who report into me, leaders, is I try to make it very clear where they're playing. Where's that field they're playing in? And then just go do you. Go do what you do and do the best you can with it. And if there's a mistakes, we'll look at it. And do we need to make adjustments? First of all, what's defined as a mistake? If you played within the rules I told you, that's on me. That's not your mistake. I'll take responsibility for that. So I think making that very clear helps. And certainly, I think there needs to be an ability for people to make those kind of mistakes, because otherwise, we're playing too safe then? And in sales, well, you know what playing safe does. You're never going to close anything. And if you're going to be on that razor's edge, what did you just promise these people, Erik, that now I have to go fulfill because you went a little over? I do think that having that playing field really clear helps create that environment where, look, if you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. Let's learn from it. Let's move on. And, I think it's easier when you're comfortable doing that.
So let's take a second. We've been largely talking about leadership of individual contributors.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where most people start their leadership journey, right? And maybe they have to go through the same hurdles you and I do, which is now I lead my peers, which we could probably do a whole episode on. And if there's something particular you want to share about that, please feel free. But like individual contributor leadership starts the journey for most of us. And then at some point, if you're any good at that, you now have to level up in a different way. Now you have to lead leaders. Maybe you could speak a little bit about some of the growth that you had to go through going from IC leader to leader of leaders.
Yeah, it was almost as drastic as becoming a leader for the first time. I think the difference was you're not really communicating the company line. Now you're helped creating what that company direction is. So you become, senior directors, VPs, C-suite. You're a part of that direction now. You're a part of that planning. So as a manager, you're a few steps away from that. You're really just you're taking a statement that might be, hey, we're going to do this new thing now. And you're going to go tell your sales team or your team of individuals, hey, this is where the company wants to go. It's going to make us grow. I had to realize there's two things. One, that I'm creating the message. I'm creating part of that vision or help execute the vision of CEOs or the owners. But also, how are we really going to accomplish that? Now, my decisions, as we mentioned before, the further up you go in leadership responsibility, the more people your decisions affect. So if I, as a VP or a CEO, COO, I decide to do something, it's going to affect everybody, not just the sales group or the operations group or the marketing group. It's potentially going to affect everyone. If we're wrong on a forecast or if we're wrong on a direction we want to go and it fails, we sent them in that direction. So we have to take some responsibility for that. So I think learning that was a bit of a shock in the beginning.
So you're right. When you get to that level, you're a collaborator on the vision of where you're actually going. And you're no longer relaying what the White Tower said you're supposed to do, participant in what you're supposed to do. And there should be theoretically a bit of a greater weight on your shoulders for that. As you're saying, I need these many people. If I come up with a plan half cocked, and then I have to go execute that plan with those people, going back to your boxes, that'll be my fault that we handed them a stupid plan or an unrealistic outcome or unrealistic timeline or didn't arm them with the assets or whatever the flaws were. What have you found? Like, how did you have to grow, and how should team leaders think about that next step when they really have to take that degree of ownership of a business outcome, not just maybe top line revenue or, a single line on the P&L?
Yeah. It's a different process, right? So I think that part of that success comes from, in my experience, how close are we to your CEO, whoever you're reporting into? Sometimes it's a whole board, it's a couple of C-suite people. So what does that relationship look like? Are we all clear and understanding of what this vision is overall? And it becomes difficult to continue down that road if you see the ship going the wrong direction or it's not going to work out. And so you have to now keep everybody who reports to you excited, on board, or Erik, go sell that thing, even though I know maybe it's not what we thought it was going to be. So there becomes a challenge with that. And I think that most of the time in my experience thus far, having those relationships with the people I'm working with and for really goes a long way in making those other conversations, if things go badly, a little bit better, a little bit easier. Um, but ultimately, that's the job of leaders, right? Or part of the job description that's left out is you're the one delivering the bad news. You're the one having the difficult conversations. And so those are things that you could read in the books, you could watch videos, but until you do it, you're going to be uncomfortable and you're going to be avoiding it, which is the worst thing to do because we've all been on the other end of people avoiding the difficult conversations. Um, so I think that those expectations and our relationships with who we're reporting to, kind of our 360 sphere of influence, it's really important, especially when things go south.
So, from what it sounds like, you've worked for some large companies and you've also worked for some companies early on to help them
Hmm.
grow through large companies.
Yeah.
What I've seen from afar is that there's some point in the initiation of a company where we got to go get the next deal. We've got to match deal to capacity. So we're scaling operations with go to market at the same time. And then, you build out your customer care or whatever those equivalent of take care of our customers is in your business. Like you start to fill in the gaps of a big boy business, if you will. And then at some point you crest this hill of like, okay, most of the gaps are kind of filled in. We still have to manage capacity and growth. But at some point, you're successful enough that your C-suite begins to wander from the mission. Whatever the initial problem you wanted to solve was, either the market has informed you that there's a bunch more problems you could solve and monetize, or you can see maybe that the market's changing and you're trying to shift, or you get a wild hair, whatever it is. Have you lived through many of those moments where a company really has to reassert its identity post getting out of that initial hurdle of launch?
Not exactly, but I do think I understand what you're saying. When you hit that crest, when you get that over that hill, and you're like, look, we actually have a company now. We have departments, we have people. A year ago there was 20 of us. Now there's department. That's when you start to get into that transition between a smaller mid-level to a big company, right? And so to grow and scale from a very small company, those foundational pieces are very important. Do we have, what are our values? What are our core values? What's our vision? Those things are important. And then you hire people who match those things, right? Those are those foundation things that allow you to even ride the hill to that hump. When you get to that hump, now those foundations have to be added onto, right? So we don't just need someone doing our payroll. We actually need like a controller or a CFO. We actually need a lawyer like on hand, not a guy we could just call for advice and get charged by the hour. So I think that in my experience, those people who successfully realize those key roles, because I think a lot of it's role development, because it's a big difference between the smaller companies and the bigger companies, or even mid-sized companies, is they have well-defined disciplined roles. So you don't, like I said, you don't have somebody running payroll from a software. You actually have a controller. Well, then now you've outgrown the controller. Now we need some payroll people. We need, accounts payable. We need receivables. We need shipping. What's shipping? We can't use ShipStation anymore. We're too big. Now we have a warehouse. We bought the warehouse. Now what do we do with the warehouse? We got to put people in there. We got to manage inventory. Well, we just had like 500 pieces a month. Now we have 10,000 pieces a month. Who's going to do all this? What's our forecast? Now, instead of ordering 500 pieces, we're going to order 10,000 pieces. But we have to give them 6 months ahead of time, lead time. So going from, kind of startup or smaller to that mid-level, those foundational pieces look a certain way. They're pretty common, right? Not easy. But if you can get there and you grow and your revenue grows, those pillars that are going around those original foundational pieces are different, but they're just as important, because then we're not going to get to the next level, right? And so I think those things are really important. I really haven't been involved. I guess I'm lucky where it just was, hey, let's just do something different. But I have seen those those operational things and organizations be really successful. And also I've seen them struggle. And those are one of the things that I've noticed is, when you say grow, you're growing people, but are they the right people? Do we really understand what this company looks like in 5 years? Because when you're starting out from nothing, it's pretty easy to see that vision. But when you're kind of at maybe 40, 50 million, what you look like at 100 million is completely different most of the time.
Yeah, it seems like it. So, we've spent the better part of our conversation at this point talking about the lessons we've learned becoming leaders, whether it's individual contributor or leading managers, et cetera. I kind of wonder if you can forecast with me, how do you think that's going to evolve in the next few years? Right? I think we're probably at arguably one of the most interesting inflections in business, at least in our lifetime, but potentially ever, with large language models and their applications, especially as they get verticalized. What do you think what does a wise leader have on their brain about the future, the next 6 to 18 months, about like what you need to do to lead your people well through this AI adoption, the curve that's happening right now?
Yeah, I think about that a lot. I think that currently you still need somebody who's the brains behind the AI machine, right? So a sales guy could do their sales job a lot more efficiently with AI now. A sales manager could do their job a lot more efficiently with AI now. But I still need the salesperson. I still need the sales manager. It might be in a year where we don't need those people the same way we do now. And I think that that'll be the true inflection point in a lot of these operational type roles. Can you have someone who isn't an expert in it let AI make those decisions for you? I haven't come across an owner who's that comfortable yet. They might have to at some point, but at least the way AI is now, you still have to have someone who's the brains behind it to kind of check the box and say, yeah, that's good. We're good to go with that. I think that very soon we'll get to the point where, people have business models where they don't even have media or AI or a marketing team. They have marketing agents, that are just like a copywriting bot. They have a ad buying bot. They have a content creation bot, and they just type in there, hey, I'd like to have an ad tomorrow with Erik and Ashley. Make it 30 seconds. Take a little bit from this video and run it on Google for $5,000 for 2 weeks. And you just have to say yes to the video it creates. So I still think that as leaders, we're going to be around for a while. We're going to still be pushing the train down the tracks. There might just be fewer people on that train.
Yeah, it's challenging to think of where humans absolutely define or contribute to the value stream, and where we've really been underutilizing humans because we didn't have an AI. I was thinking about this the other day. There's a lot of jobs that I've never said it out loud this way before, so if I screw this up, well, here goes. But there's a lot of jobs that if you could pay a cat or a dog or a monkey to do them, that would be just fine. Because at the end of the day, you're hiring someone overqualified. A human is so much more competent and capable and creative. Right. They have so much more to contribute than what the job requires of them. And that mismatch, that misalignment of how much the job needs of them versus how much they're capable of, just by the virtue of being a functional human, where a lot of people find lack of satisfaction in their job, and where they find animosity towards the company that they work for. And it isn't necessarily that the AI is going to take their job, as much as it might be that a human never should have been doing that job, and it's been leading to so many problems. That's going to be really hard in the transition. We're going to end up with people who used to have a paycheck over here that don't anymore. And hopefully companies find a better way to leverage those humans who are bought in and in the ecosystem, and they already know what they like. That's what we're rooting for with some of our companies. But it sure feels like it's tough to clearly articulate that, or to take a position on that doesn't get you skewered, let alone implement the damn thing at this point. What's that looking like for your entities?
The way I would look at that, you kind of touched on that. If you have somebody on your team that is a great culture fit, whatever that culture definition is for you, and they're dedicated and they do great work, even though it's a cat or dog type of job, to use your words, you're going to find, or you should find, a place for them in your organization. That, to me, is one of the cornerstones of building a good culture. Companies that have longevity with their employees typically do that a lot. Hey, Erik, Ashley, you guys really aren't great salespeople, but we love you here. You're a great fit to this company. We're starting this new thing in the warehouse. You want to go run it for us? Let's move you over there. And so I'm with you. I hope that organizations do that. Time will tell. I feel like early on, it's not going to just completely eliminate people. It will eliminate some of those button pushing type jobs where it's like, yeah, maybe we could just have someone, an AI do this, where, the back end or somewhere up higher level has a checkbox that they're doing. I think banking will probably be one of the laggers, right? Because you're dealing with money. Big transactions, I think, will be lagging. Real estate transactions will probably not have AI in the beginning to fully automate those processes. By the way, Erik, I'd love if they did, because I hate signing like those 50 pieces of paper that you do.
There's that process. Talk about zero contribution to the value stream. Rent,
right? But
galore,
because the stakes are so high with that, I feel like, and there's a lot of regulations with that. So to answer your question, it's kind of a weird way to throw in culture building into this conversation, but hopefully they do that. Hopefully they realize that Erik's a great part of this company. We don't want to lose him, but really what he's doing now, this AI thing can no question do it. So, maybe they train that person how to use the AI. That could be a short-term thing, but hopefully they're keeping people within their organization and finding them some value somewhere else.
It does seem like a bit of a Rubik's Cube. I mean, tell me if you see it otherwise. The vast majority of business owners that I know, entrepreneurs, business owners, or business leaders, know that they are human capital constrained. Almost, I don't know any owner that I've ever met over a coffee, beer, or social engagement or professional meeting who's like, you know what, actually, we are so good with people. We don't need another single soul in our company right now. That's not the case for almost any business.
Yeah. And most of those same people have no idea how to leverage AI still.
For sure.
They'll get there, but they don't now.
So we have this strange situation where we know we need more people, and we're considering solutions that will eliminate people, potentially if they're done correctly. But I really do think it does come back to that word you used, culture. And I think leadership's a big part of it. I had a guy on my podcast a couple of weeks ago. His name's Parth Vyasingh, and he's from Gujarat, India. He leads a payment processing company, has a team of 70 some odd folks. I believe he's in the operations side. I think he's the COO. And Parth shared this brilliant perspective of what he'd lived through when they adopted AI in his company. And that's that you could go tell your team, we're going to adopt this AI, whatever the process, solution, automation is. But if they fear it, or they think that the incentives are misaligned, you're not going to get it. And so we almost have this perception right now that I could push a button and AI has been adopted and all this efficiency has been experienced. But the reality is it's going to go at the pace of adoption by the people who use it, whose jobs are directly interfacing with it. And those people can slow it down or make it as inefficient as they want it to be. We used to do these side-by-side comparisons for how fast our technology could be installed on piping systems with our old construction companies. And it would be hilarious because a skilled welder who we would be effectively competing with, right? Our product replaced the weld that they needed to do pipes together. That was the direct comparison. And a skilled welder could do it in a certain amount of time, and they would do it in that time. And it didn't matter how many minutes it took them.
Yeah.
If they wanted to, that same welder could make my technology take longer.
Oh, yeah.
They could make it
Yeah.
as inefficient as all hell and find every problem they wanted with it if they didn't have a good reason or motivation to do so. And that's the dynamic I think we really have with AI adoption is, we're afraid of this doomsday scenario where people are going to be replaced in mass because that absolutely could happen. But when it really boils down to it, the people adopting it, the ones making it work, have to be bought in on it, or they're going to make it the slowest, worst technology that's ever been used. And leadership was Parth's answer to that. He was able to lay out how they've accomplished amazing things because they worked really hard for a year on like, how do we align incentives? How do we build
Yeah.
trust?
Yeah.
How do we listen to our people and reassure them? This isn't to replace your job. It's to unlock the new thing you're capable of because you are a cultural fit. And you can do that with a team of 70. That's not too big. But there's some number where it becomes unwieldy and you have to have real leadership on leadership alignment of it that feels like maybe where the scary pockets of this are. I don't know. What do you think about that perspective?
I do think that in a lot of ways, it literally is buy-in, right? We go back to the textbook version of how do you get buy-in for something new? Well, it certainly isn't by just saying, hey guys, here's this new AI tool I just bought and we're going to use it tomorrow. Well, no one's going to want it and they're going to bog it down and it's never going to get executed. On the other hand, if you involve them in the development process, and if you involve them in the vision of why we're doing this, buy-in becomes easier. Hopefully they don't sabotage the process or make it slower intentionally. And at the end of the day, you have a better result. You have a better product because I don't know how to use a CRM better than the people using a CRM every single day. But if I say there's a piece of AI that's going to make your AI life or your sales life better in that CRM you love so much, but hey, jump on this call with me. Let's just check this out and see how this can help you. And all of a sudden, their attitude changes. You can take the person who's most against all software known to mankind. And all of a sudden, the next day after the meeting, hey, here's how we can use that. Perfect. That's what I wanted to hear. Just what you want to do with it, because I'm not going to define it. You define the parameters. You're using it. I'm just paying the check, or I'm taking this from the leadership that they want to do this. So in a lot of ways, I feel like the buy-in, and which he probably did in your example, I'm sure he had people understand why they're doing what they're doing. And 70 people or 700, you still have to have people understand why you're doing what you're doing. At least it gets easier for buy-in. No matter the project size, I think it just gets executed a lot easier.
What you just described, that example of getting that hesitant or uninterested party to participate in the journey with you,
Mm-hmm.
so that you plant this seed with them and then just see if they grip it and run with it. That seems to be the best recipe for generating buy-in. I think maybe there's a show them a slide deck, preach from the ivory tower way that people think you're supposed to get buy-in, but that's not really what works, right?
No, it doesn't work.
I think that's brilliant.
I can tell you from my experience, it's horrible doing that. I've been on the receiving end,
Yeah.
which is lesson number 9 on leadership. You learn things from bad leaders, right? You learn what not to do. But also, when we have people involved in the process, a lot of times if I have a great idea in the vacuum of my own mind, I'll call everybody together, or everybody who's going to be the stakeholders, and say, hey guys, what do you think if we did this? And I know that first meeting, number one, is not going to be the best version of that because you just never get the most participation the first time, right? But I also go in that meeting knowing they are going to shoot so many holes in this stupid idea I have. But at the end, I'm going to have a great idea because they were involved in it. And now I've already have the buy-in because they created it. And at the end of the day, I had this little kernel of an idea. Hey, if you use your, CRM for this, or why don't we sell in this way, Erik, and, maybe pre-book a couple of orders before. That way it helps our warehouse. And you might say, Ash, how are we going to deliver them? And like, that's screwed up. Oh yeah. Okay. Delivery. I forgot all about that. Okay. So we solved the delivery problem. Erik, look, we could deliver it this way. We could do this and you could pre-book. And by the way, your commission will be bumped because of this pre-book. So it's a great way to get people to buy in, and also a great way to throw your ideas out there, because some of them are really crappy ideas. Trust me, I've had them all. But at the end of these meetings, 1, 2, 3 meetings with your teams and your leaders, you end up with a great idea because they've participated and the buy-in's instant.
Yeah, and I think it also summons that psychological safety requirement we talked about a bit earlier, right? Because you're not
Exactly.
going to be willing to shoot your idea full of holes and tell you why you're stupid and wrong and why this is.
Right.
If they don't
Yeah.
have that, you're going to get this false sense of buy-in. It made me instantly jump visually to. Are you familiar at all with survivor bias, like the mathematicians who really helped airplanes last longer during World War II with this concept of survivor bias? Have you ever heard this before?
A little bit, yes.
So like the idea was a bunch of planes would fly back after a bombing mission and they would look at where all the holes were
Yeah.
and say, those are the places we need to put armor. And then this mathematician's like, no, 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 you're misunderstanding.
Yeah.
Those are the planes that made it back. Like,
Right.
where are the holes not on those? Because that's the places are getting shot that didn't make it back.
That didn't make it. Yeah.
Inverted perspective of what that
Yes.
should look like. And
Yeah.
I really want my idea plane to take as many bullet holes as possible that help us
Yeah.
identify what's fatal and what's not in that conversation. And I got to be willing to let them shoot at it and tell me what's good, bad, and ugly.
And when I have leaders do that for me, or if they'll come to me with, hey, what if we do this? I'll say, have you talked to the team about it? I mean, I'm not going to be able to shoot the holes. This is your day to day.
Yeah, sure.
So I could give you, I could say yes. Your team's going to hate it if you haven't talked to them first. And not only they're going to hate it, they probably have some ideas that'll help you make it even better. And so, yeah, Erik, go back and talk to me next week. Let's see what you got. And so I think there's a healthy environment that you have to create for these things to really happen successfully. And probably for us, because we've been doing it for so long, it happens pretty easily. People young in their career are going to struggle with that, right? Because they think they're the boss and this is what it is. And we're going to do this because I think this will make us better. Then you get into all those challenges. People write books about it, how to get people to do what you want. Well, I mean, if you have that attitude, you're probably already wrong. So, but anyways, yeah.
Well, I think you're right? There is a cautionary tale that we've learned and a lot of folks have learned in their leadership lives that is just going to have to be accelerated because this onboarding of AI, the existential opportunity and risk that it presents is going to present to most industries in the next, call it 5 years. Some have already been hit heavily, right? Think about what's happened in content creation and digital marketing and what's coming for coding. And it's already here in some ways. Like it's going to continue to bite off industry by industry areas where it has a big impact. And anybody getting promoted into leadership roles for the first time or second time or leading leaders for the first time in this next 5-year window, boy, buckle up because all the lessons are going to be accelerated with probably far more dramatic outcomes, positive and negative.
Yeah. They're going to have a challenge in some ways that we didn't have because of what AI is capable of. But on the other hand, we did experience the internet. At least I did, Erik. I'll speak for myself.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
When I first started my career, the internet was there. It was awful. Over the course of the next 30 years up to now, there is different times that you have to evolve. What you're describing, which I agree with, is that timing, the timing in between those evolutions is going to be very quick.
Yeah.
You and I had 5-10 years to get used to Facebook or Instagram or social media. Well, these kids and people young in their careers are going to have to get used to changes in months, not years. And it'll fundamentally change how things are run. But at the end of the day, as long as there's still people around, leadership's still going to have its basic fundamentals in place. You're still going to have to influence your teams. You're still going to have to care about people, care about each other, care about what you're even trying to accomplish at the company. Do you care about what you're doing? Early in our careers, we probably take jobs because we get a paycheck. It's awesome. I was lucky enough to work for a golf company. Well, I love golf, so that was easy. And I get paid and I'm learning business. This is great. So, but it's going to be interesting. It's going to be really interesting.
Well, it's certainly an arena for accelerated skill development, and that's going to be a requirement for leaders. And whether learning how to use an AI tool or learning how to get that buy-in through that journey you described of letting people shoot holes in your airplane, or even seeking mentors, your ability to do that rapidly seems like it's going to be an important aspect. Yeah, I have one more question, actually, one more thought. I was listening to, I'm trying to remember which podcast it was. I was listening to a podcast last week, and they were describing the disconnect that, that's who it was. It was Brett Weinstein. He's an evolutionary biologist, and he was on Joe Rogan's podcast. And he was describing how this is the first generation in history. I'm a early millennial. You seem maybe-ish on the same timeline, 41, but saying basically millennials and younger are the first generations in history where the lessons that they observed in their early childhood do not map at all onto their lived reality as an adult. And it's a function of technology and how rapidly right? From internet to cell phone to social to self-driving cars and AI, right? And so I wonder how much that's true for our leadership lives as well. The lessons we learned of the patient gurus, the wisdom and the pace with which you would have sought mentors and the frequency with which you would have received feedback. And
yeah,
do you feel like there's maybe a gap in that heuristic of what we maybe learned in our young leadership lives that might not port perfectly over to this realistic dynamic that they're about to go through?
It's an interesting topic that I talk about a lot, because we're almost diving into society, right? A societal kind of, what is society going to look like in 5 years? It's going to look a lot different than when I grew up. When we look back in history, I imagine daily life in 1915 looked a lot different compared to 1940, 1945, right? I think the difference is going to be what we talked about already. That difference, and you could just take a couple of decades, any which way you want, it's going to happen in a couple years, not decades now. And I think that will be the biggest shock to someone like us, because, my daughter's 16. She doesn't have a TV in her room. They don't watch TV. High school kids don't watch TV. They watch the social media. Maybe they watch something on Netflix if it's popular.
And how weird, when we were kids, it would have been so cool to have your own more than one TV in the house, let alone room, right?
Right.
That
right. So as it relates to leadership, you mentioned Henry Ford and those kind of things. And I don't think that Henry Ford and those early businesses, they were developing what leaders are. At the time, the only real example they had that was on an industry level was the military. And the military is based by your title. Erik, if your title's higher than mine, you ask me to do something, I just go do it. It doesn't matter if you care about me or not. I go do it. And in the military, it's required because our lives might be on the line, like literally. So you have to have that. Some of those changes as business evolved, I don't know that in the 70s people were really talking about leadership training, were they? I don't know. I don't think so, not like they do today. And I don't think it's just because it's a niche where you can make money and consult. I think because, one, the number of entrepreneurs feels like it's just a lot more than ever. And so the need for leadership skills is as high as it's ever been. But I also think business just ran so differently. So I think what's going to happen is in the future, it's going to accelerate. The change in business culture is going to change so quickly because of AI and whatever else is next, right? That's going to be what's going to happen, in my opinion. It'll be very similar to what happened when you pick decades. In the past, it just took decades for those changes to happen. I think it's just going to be in a couple of years that you're going to see the way business fundamentally function will change. I don't know that leadership will change. It'll evolve. Because I think you're still going to, at least in our lifetime, there's still going to be people. I think we can agree on that. There are going to be people in businesses. You're not just going to have an autonomous business at some point. when our kids, now think about what their life will look like when they grow up.
Figure out what colleges. My daughters are 6 and 9. I can't fathom the value or what the heck a university is going to be in 9 years when my oldest is ready for that. Like,
That's right. Yeah. So
my head around.
If you think about that, it's going to look different, but at the very least, they're still going to have to learn how to deal with people. And maybe, Erik, that's the underlying theme, because they don't deal with people now on a face-to-face basis. None of them do now. They are all on, like this. Although we're on a video, it's not the same as in person. And there are many people who, I work remote now. I like the office. I think there's benefits either way. But why would you, if you're going to start a big business, have this huge rental space, unless you absolutely had to?
I think one of the interesting bunch of fascinating things there, but one that's standing out to me is this. You were describing the leadership culture in the military, which was the best example for early industry to try to adopt. And it would have been the only thing that a large percentage of the working age male population would have experienced potentially culturally. And a similar parallel is actually sports as well. Obviously different life and death dynamic there, but win or lose, believe your senior guys, listen to the ones who are better than you is kind of beat into you if you're an athlete of sort, right? So there's certain pockets that had developed functional leadership that mapped well to the reality of their workforce, their situation that they were in. And then that was ported over into industry. And maybe for the next 60 to 80 years, industry wrestled with that and tried to figure out like how much of that really does work through the changes in society that happened between 1930 and 2000. Like just so many changes to reality.
Right.
That I think you're right. The emergence of a leadership consulting class isn't necessarily just because it's a space where you can make money and, do all sorts of things for your career, but because reality is proving that old leadership model doesn't map to reality very well. And I think what'll emerge, it's going to be very different by industry and company size, but what's emerging is like what works is what we're really passionate about. What's the right version of leadership? The right version of leadership is the one that unlocks the human potential and accomplishes whatever the mission is along the way. Like that's, but what that specifically is, I don't think we should be overly married to, because we're about to bump into a bunch of friction with our reality. But that does seem to be the nature of it. The leadership's going to have to adapt to the realities that we're in. And the companies that do that well are probably going to make a lot of money and do really, really well and have a lot of fun. And the ones that don't are probably going to be left behind a little bit. That's the nature of competition, I think. Ash, what do you, take a second if you would, as we wrap up. What do you think this episode's been about? Like what's, if you were to try to describe in a sentence what you talked about when you came on this long podcast with somebody, like what would you use to describe it?
I wasn't surprised that we shared a lot of the same experiences. I think that people, if you're in leadership long enough, we all run into the same things, whether they're good experiences or bad experiences. We have a lot of the same challenges and we've overcome them. And we both come from different backgrounds, but we have the same stories, just different characters and different products. And I think what that tells me is that there's value in what you're doing by continuing to talk about these kind of things. I think there's value in mentoring people still, because if it's true for me, I'm a little older than you. It's true for you. It's true for people who are in their 20s. It's true for people who are older than me. That means there's still value in having awareness that it's a skill we need to work on. It's a discipline, just like any other discipline that you have to work on. But I wasn't surprised that we shared the same leadership hurdles and successes, because it happens to everybody. These things happen to everybody that we talk about.
Yeah, it does seem to be universal. Industry, age, seniority, doesn't really matter. If you lead humans, these are the shapes of the problems and conversations that you grow through. Well, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your wisdom and your story. Hey, if somebody wanted to connect with you, what's the best way for someone to go about that?
Probably LinkedIn, my LinkedIn.
Cool. We'll make sure and share that in the show notes. Ash, thank you so much for coming on. And thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Erik. Take care.